Hi, and this is video number 3 in relation to how to dig a feature. Now, in the previous video, number 2, I gave you a copy of a context sheet. And now that we've dug out half of our pit, and we've worked out how many fills you have, and also the shape of the cut, we can start doing the recording. Now, we've taken out some numbers already for this feature, and when you get your numbers of context sheets, you have to start filling them out and answering the questions on the sheet. Now, if you look at the context sheet, if you perhaps can print it out, you will see that we have in the top right hand corner the context number. And that's where you put the context number of the first fill, and you do the same for any other fills that you may have in the pit. Next to it you have the site code, and of course that relates to the code number given to the individual site. So you write that in that box. And then the next box, it says site, and sites will have their own name. And the last box to the left is the grid square, and we will talk about that in a later video. Now, on the left hand side you will see a box which says deposits, and that's where we answer the questions in relation to any fills in our feature. And number 1 is compaction. Now, as you'll see below me, I've included some of the words that we use to describe our deposits, and these are standardized, and it makes it much easier for the site supervisor later on to understand what everybody's talking about. So you need to choose some of those terms to describe the compaction. So for instance, it's generally the case that a fill in a pit may be friable, which means it's grainy and it's loose and it just falls to bits in your hands. And that's one of the terms that we use, friable. But as you see below me, there are other terms that you can use to describe the compaction. Number 2 is the colour, and again below me you'll see various ways of describing the colour. Number 3 is composition, and of course you have to talk about what the actual soil is. And again below me you'll see how you can go about that by following a certain number of pathways, by testing the soil in your fingers and answering yes or no as to the question about the soil. Number 4 is inclusions, and this really includes anything that's perhaps roughly less than 10% of the actual makeup of the deposit. So the inclusions might include, for instance, something like oyster shell, or fragments of pottery, or some fragments of flint, or you might have lenses of organic material. And they're the inclusions, so you put those in there. And then 5 is dimensions. So really you need to think about, is the deposit evenly thick, or does it get thinner towards a certain direction? In which case you could say the northern part of the deposit is 10 millimeters thick and gets thinner towards the south, down to about 2 millimeters thick, or centimeters. You need to describe that sort of thing. And then number 6 is the discussion, and really that allows you to talk about it in a general sense to help the supervisor understand what this soil was. Now on the right hand side you'll have a box which says cuts, and of course that describes the actual cut of the pit itself. And again below me you'll see some of the helpful suggestions that I put on this video, on this blog. And really they speak for themselves. Number 1 is the shape. So not everything is completely circular, so it might be oval, for instance. And it says the sides. You have to describe if the sides are steep or shallow or gradual, and you'll see below me the sort of thing I'm talking about. The base, obviously, whether it's concave, in this case obviously it's a pit, so it is concave, although sometimes they are flat. So you have to describe that. And then the dimensions. So that's the overall dimensions of the pit itself. You measured it and write it down. orientation, of course, if it's an oval pit, you have to describe if the orientation is east-west or north-south or anywhere in between. And then it says number 6, truncated. Now it might be the case that our pit has been truncated by a later feature, like a ditch, which has cut through it. So you have to go and find the number for that ditch, which you've probably dug yourself, and put the number of the cut of the ditch that's truncated your pit. And then number 7 says fills, and that's where we put the fill numbers on the cut sheet, so that the supervisor can refer back to the cut sheets that you've already filled out. And then number 8, again, is a general discussion. It allows you to talk about the pit generally. Again, always say something that you think may help the supervisor understand the feature that you've been digging. Now, all those little boxes in the middle I'll talk about later, because that relates to the Harris matrix. And the interpretation box, of course, I'll come to later when we've actually finished doing all the processes of digging the pit. And the boxes at the bottom I'll come to later, again in a later video. Okay, so that describes how we start to fill in the context sheets, and in the next video I'll talk about doing some recording by planning and drawing a section. See you then.